That was pretty good, I think. I'd have to look at the book for that. Hey y'all, I'm Rylan. Welcome to my channel. I'm doing something that I have not done in months, and I'm very excited about it because I pulled out my trusty journal that I started working on at the beginning of this year, where I was writing out YouTube ideas and goals for the year, and also my handy dandy book review outline. So I'm very happy to be jumping back into this very occasionally, but I recently finished a book that I want to talk about and give a singular book review for. I do love giving book reviews. I love writing them out. I love talking about books, and I do like the idea of jumping back into single book review videos, just as a way to dive really deep into one book and give y'all my thoughts on it. So the book that I'm going to be doing my review on today is Riley Sager's newest book, Middle of the Night. I have read every single book by this author and I'm very excited to be caught up on his list now that I've read this newest book, and I'm looking forward to giving y'all my thoughts on it for a few minutes, but let's go ahead and jump right into things. Riley Sager is very much known for his thriller books. Every book that he has written, I would say, can be considered a thriller. Some of them lean a little bit paranormal or maybe a little bit horror as well, but largely his books consist of thrillers. So Middle of the Night is no different. It's very slow burn, but it is still a thriller, I would say, and is full of plot twists and turns and very exciting moments that left me very interested to see what would end up happening next. I do like to give some general information about these books as well. Middle of the Night was published in June of 2024, so as I've already said, this is Riley Sager's newest release, and Dutton is the publisher for this book. I think they've done all of his books. I got my copy of this book through Book of the Month. All of my books by Riley Sager are from this book subscription service, which is awesome because they all look very uniform, lined up on my shelf with their logos on the spines, and just they all look very cohesive. So that's where I got this one. I almost always end up pausing my Book of the Month subscription at some point in the beginning of the year, and then I end up getting it back in the summer when we're prepping for his new book to come out, because he always publishes a book in June of the summer. So I think I've done that for the last 3 or 4 years, and I'll keep Book of the Month for a few months, then pause it, and then get it back in the next year when his newest book is about to come out. So very exciting. I do love my copy of the book. I love having all of his books in Book of the Month editions, and I've already said this, they look great together, so I love that. I'm going to give a very quick synopsis about this book before I dive into my own rating, but this book is a thriller about a man named Ethan who grew up on this cul-de-sac on which his best friend Billy disappeared one night when he was 10 years old. They were camping in his backyard, and when Ethan awoke, his friend was gone and they never found him or his body. 30 years later, Ethan has moved back into his parents' old house, and he thinks that Billy has come back to communicate with him, to haunt him, to do what he doesn't know. But Ethan is trying to figure out if Billy is alive or dead, and weird things are just happening on this cul-de-sac. And as people from his childhood also come back into the area or are still living in the area, Ethan finds out a lot of information about that night when he was a child that he didn't know, and a lot of information is revealed, and he finds out the truth about what happened to his best friend on the night that he last saw him. That was pretty good, I think. I'd have to look at the book for that. I just blurted that out on my own, so go me. But I think that's pretty accurate to what the inside of the book says without giving away too much information. I do like to give content warnings for my books as well. So the content warnings for this book include child death, grief, death, drug abuse, addiction, dementia, car accident, kidnapping, bullying. I got all of those from Storygraph. I love Storygraph as a way to find content warnings, so that's those content warnings for this book, but I'll also have them listed in the description down below in case you would like to see them there as well. My rating for this book, jumping into the juicy part of the review, of course, is the rating, and I gave this book 4 stars, which is very shocking to me because at the beginning of this book my attention was very much waning on it. I wasn't super invested. I kind of found my brain wandering as I would sit down to listen to it on audio, but I ended up really enjoying this book for several different reasons. In terms of my ranking of his books, is this my favorite book by Riley Sager? Definitely not. I think Lock Every Door or The Last Time I Lied will always be top of the list for me, but I think I could put Middle of the Night at number 3 out of however many books he's published. I'm trying to think. I don't want to think through all of them right now. I'm not going to list all of them, but I think this would be my number 3 book if I'm remembering all of his books correctly. Probably number 4 actually, because I think my top 3 would be Lock Every Door, The Last Time I Lied, and then The House Across the Lake. But Middle of the Night is very good. I really ended up enjoying it. I was very nervous, of course, as I've already said. A lot of people that I'm friends with on Goodreads did not end up liking this one, so I was very nervous from that aspect as well. But I'm very glad that I ended up picking this book up and reading it, and I'm glad that I really ended up enjoying it. So to dive into reasons why I like this book, I like to divide up my reviews with plot and character, and I feel like in thrillers you kind of get a mix of both of those. Some books are, you know, plot heavy, some are very character driven, but I feel like thrillers, at least Sager's thrillers, and really a lot of thrillers in general, I guess, like you kind of get a balance of both, because you have to understand the motivation of the characters in terms of like the mystery of the thrillers, and you know, I feel like they work together and can be pretty balanced when it comes to thrillers. So maybe that's just me, maybe that made no sense, but I said it, so we're gonna roll with it. But in terms of the plot of this book, again, I thought that it was a very slow burn, and that made me very nervous as I first started diving into it. But thankfully, as we kind of got into the story, as we got into the secrets of these characters and their pasts and their childhood, I felt as though the plot picked up, especially when we were introduced to the new setting, which was a place called the Hawthorne Institute, which is this institute, this huge mansion that backed up to this cul-de-sac after a mile-long length of woods, I think, and very mysterious things happened there. I think that when all that stuff started getting introduced into the story, I really grew captivated. I love a good mysterious setting. I love a good isolation story, and I felt like that element added to the plot very well and was able to keep it going when my attention was not all there for a while. I also like the fact that we go back and forth between the past and the present, and in the past you kind of get to follow all the characters' perspectives who were involved that day or the day leading up to the event that happened to Billy when he was 10 and was taken from the tent at night. You get to follow the perspective of multiple children in this friend group, this quote-unquote friend group, and what they did that day and the things that went down that all kind of led to what ended up happening. And then of course in the present timeline we're following Ethan and the trauma from his childhood that still lives with him today, and the haunting that he's feeling and his determination to find out what happened to Billy now that he's back, and maybe enough years have passed that the distance is there enough for him to feel as though he finally wants to pursue the truth, if that makes sense. Whereas for 30 years, he was kind of just dealing with the grief and the loss and the insomnia and the fear of having his own children because of what happened to his best friend. When he comes back 30 years later and he's a grown adult living in this house by himself, he is determined to find out what all of these things are that are happening to him and figure out what actually happened to Billy 30 years before. So again, the plot very slow burn, but in the end it did include several very interesting twists that I did not see coming, and the setting played a huge role in the plot for me as well, which I really enjoyed. And overall plot ended up being pretty solid, I would say. By the end of it, I didn't feel as though it was out of nowhere. I didn't feel as though anything was super anticlimactic. I felt as though everything wrapped up very nicely, and honestly the last chapter brought tears to my eyes a little bit, so there's always that, which I enjoy and connect with when it comes to my books. I think that when a book makes me feel emotions like that, it's pretty good, you know? And then characters, this is actually Riley Sager's very first book that is following a male character overall as the lead, as the overarching character of this book. I think one of my biggest gripes with Sager sometimes is the fact that he writes pretty unlikable female characters, which I can get behind in thrillers, but it's kind of a relief to follow a character who, one, wasn't super unlikable, and two, wasn't a female that he was kind of shedding a bad light onto, because I feel like a lot of his thrillers kind of do that. Whether or not it's intentional, I don't think it is, but I did kind of appreciate that change, although I'd love it if he would write a likable female character. But that's a different story. Ethan, I thought was very likable. He went through a lot as a child, and although he's not completely blameless, I do think he really cared about his friend and really wants to find out the truth about what happened to Billy, because so much has happened to Ethan since then, and he is still very much caught up in the grief and pain and fear of it all, that I had to admire his determination from that aspect. We also have a very, very big plot twist that I kind of guessed in the middle of the book regarding his wife, and that made me really sad. I think it endeared me to Ethan even more, just knowing why he was doing what he was doing and how palpable his fear was throughout the book with his relationship and with his past, of course, that honestly, overall, I thought that Ethan was very likable. Usually when it comes to thrillers, I honestly don't mind an unlikable or an unreliable character or narrator because I feel as though they very much fit the genre of a thriller, but Ethan was very likable in my opinion, and I kind of appreciated that for a change because I feel like a lot of course, characters in thrillers are not, and it's kind of nice to read about a guy who wasn't perfect, but also wasn't unlikable, and he was only unreliable in terms of like not being able to remember the past and just kind of like succumbing himself to grief and all the things that he went through. So overall, really liked Ethan. I think his character fit into the book perfectly, and I really, really liked the ending with him as well. He is part of the reason why I teared up, so loved that. But overall, I did end up really enjoying Middle of the Night. My one gripe about the cover of this book is that the descriptions of this cul-de-sac are beautiful houses with people who are very wealthy and have money, and the cover of this does not depict that at all, I would say, but that's okay. That's fine. I want the cover to be accurate to what's inside the book, you know? But anyway, overall, ended up really enjoying this one. I do like a good slow burn. I was a little bit nervous that nothing would end up happening in this book that would excite me or like get me captivated by the plot of the story, but thankfully that did end up happening, and I would say that this book ranks in my top 4 of Riley Sager's releases, all of which I have read, and every time I read one of his books I get very excited for his newest one. So this is the most up to date I've ever been, I think, on all of his books. I read his 2023 release, the only one left, earlier this year, actually I think on January 1st. I did a book review for that book as well, which I'll tag above. Did not love that book, but overall I really enjoyed Riley Sager's books that I've read. I think he writes very solid thrillers, and I'm always very excited to see what he ends up writing next. Also, one more overall thought is that you kind of get this paranormal element to this book, which always makes me very nervous because I'm very much a person who is rooted in real world things unless I'm reading a fantasy book. So thankfully I thought that this one touched on paranormal in a way that did not feel like it was unrealistic or overwhelming or just kind of annoying or frustrating to me. Instead, I thought it was very well done and not too much, but just enough to help drive the plot. So there's that too. But again, I really like Riley Sager's books, and I'm very glad that I ended up enjoying this one. Overall, I really like his stuff, and I'm excited to see what he writes next year. I don't know if he's announced anything yet, but if he has, I need to go look because I'm always very curious to see what his next thriller is going to be about. But officially read all of his books, very exciting. I'll have my The Only One Left review tagged above somewhere if you'd like to watch that video. My review of that one I think is kind of opposite of a lot of people's feelings for it, but it was fine, is all I'll say. But feel free to go watch that if you're interested, and keep an eye out for more singular book review videos. I do really enjoy going deep into the books that I read and talking about them with y'all, and I do love formatting my reviews in this way. So keep an eye out for more videos like this coming in the near future. But that's all that I have for today's video. If you have read any of Sager's books, feel free to comment down below and let me know your thoughts on them, or let me know what you rated this book if you have already read it as well. That's all that I have for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.